am Dr. Darlene Antezana. I am interviewing Colonel Marilyn Wills, retired, for the office of Congresswoman Donna Edwards. We are recording at Prince George's Community College on October 19th, 2013. Thank you very much for being here. Where and when were you born?
Well, I was born November 13th, 1960, and in Monroe, Louisiana.
Oh, okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Well, my mother was a single mom. She had 3 daughters, but she was an educated school teacher. She has her master's degree from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And my father lived in Monroe, but he was just removed from the home. But she did, in fact, remarry to Roosevelt Elverfield, who is now my father.
Okay, good. So you said you had 2 sisters?
I have 2 sisters. I'm the middle one. I have an older sister, Sandra, and my youngest sister is Connie.
Did either of them serve in the military?
Not at all. Not at all.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, it's actually a funny story. I was in college, and I had a work study at Southern University in the ROTC department. And I would see the cadets always on campus in their uniforms, and I swore I would never do that. That was not me. And one of the instructors asked what I was going to do for the summer. College student, back in the 80s, go work at McDonald's, find a job doing something. But he said, you know, how about go try the Army out? We're going to pay you, we're going to feed you, and if you don't like it, you can go back home. It sounded like a plan to me. I talked to my mom. She was excited, but my dad wasn't buying it. But I went to this camp in ROTC at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I enjoyed it, and I joined the Army.
Interesting. So the branch of service was the Army?
The Army, that's correct.
You chose the Army?
Yes.
You are a volunteer?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know,
I was commissioned as an officer, a second lieutenant in the Army in 1983.
so you graduated from college and were commissioned an officer?
That's right. Graduated from college first, and then I was commissioned a second lieutenant right into the military.
Way to go.
Active duty.
So you chose the Army because they approached you?
Pretty much, because no one in my family had any military service that I knew of. And working the ROTC, I would see the cadets. It looked exciting, but in college it just wasn't something I wanted to do. But after that summer camp, I knew I was a leader, and that is, in fact, the Army teaches leadership. And that's why I joined the Army.
When you left for your early training, where did you go and what was it like?
In college, I was asked what specialty I wanted, and I wanted to be a police officer. Even in college, I was a criminal justice major. That's what I wanted to do. And I, in fact, got my first choice, being a military policeman. So I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Military Police Corps. I graduated May 15th. May 16th, I had to report to Fort McClellan, Alabama. Packed up my car and drove to Alabama, and I started my military police training.
So how long was that training, and what does that encompass?
That training was 6 weeks. All second lieutenants who had just been commissioned come to Fort McClellan, Alabama to receive training. I would tell you it was tough, but I was prepared because ROTC prepared me for that next step. What I was not prepared for was some of the physical training that had to be done. Also the marksmanship training, you know, where you had to fire your weapon. But that's what that basic course was there for, was to teach you and make you a leader as well as a military police officer.
Do you recall your instructors?
Ooh, wow. I do recall one. Her name was, she was a captain at the time, a black female captain. And that was strange because my whole time in training at Fort Knox, I had not seen an African-American officer. Oh, really? All we saw was the enlisted soldiers. And when I got to Fort McClellan, there was a black female captain, Captain Carrie Kendricks at the time. And she was my mentor. I wanted to be like her because she had reached that goal of being a captain. Yeah.
And with your second lieutenants, were you the only female?
I was the only female in my class. I was the only African American in my basic course.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was an island, I'll be honest. It was an island. I was on an island.
Were there any difficulties?
I will say yes, but hesitantly because of the kind of person I am. I want to be a part of a group. I want to learn. And so I chose, versus being this island, I was going to be a member of the team. And so there were some good other second lieutenants who were there. Also understand there are classes before me and there are classes coming in after me who did have 2 African American males in the class. Again, no women. And sometimes that was a struggle. But I did find some white young ladies who were just wonderful. And we are still friends today from coming together in that basic course.
Oh, very good. So did you receive any other specialized training, or was all of your training for military police?
Well, at the time when I was at Fort McClellan, I left that training and I was accepted into the physical security course. So I became a physical security specialist at that same time. From there, you go on to your next assignment. Throughout my 30 years of military service, yes, there's been numerous trainings that I've gone to. I'm a human resource professional as well as an inspector general, and I have done that several times.
Wow, impressive. How did you adapt to military life, including, as you've mentioned, the physical regimen, barracks, food, social life?
Yeah, when I first joined the Army, may not look like it now, I didn't weigh 100 pounds. And I did not know it was a requirement. At the time, you had to weigh 100 pounds. So when I got to Fort McClellan, Alabama, I was on a potato regiment. So every morning for lunch and dinner, I had to have potatoes to put weight on. And when they would start the physical training of running, I would fall out of the runs, thinking someone would come and get me. Nobody came and got me. So it's like, okay, you got to get up and get going yourself. So it was a challenge for a college student because that's not something we're used to. You know, we ate junk food and you wasn't physically fit. You was just having a good time in college. But that all changed because it changed my paradigm of the way I was thinking. And I knew I had to be successful in the early stage so that I could be successful later on. Some of the challenges back then were, one was that physical training. I would tell you, that thing would kick my butt after a while. But I got it, you know, to run 2 miles in a certain amount of time, to do push-ups in a certain amount of time, and you had to do at least 60%. And as well as doing sit-ups. Again, you had to do 60% to pass. But me, I wanted to do more than 60% because I knew I could. So that was the biggest challenge. I would tell you, I went to a historical black college. I know that they prepared me as a good student. But when I got to Fort McClellan, Alabama, I was told I didn't know how to write. That crushed my spirit because I knew how to write. But I was put in a remedial writing class. I could have been bitter about it, but I said, okay, it's just going to make me better. They put me in a remedial writing class. I went to that class every morning before I went to my basic course class. A little upset, but knew I was going to get through this because I thought I was being targeted. All of my instructors were white. The black female I talked about, she was not an instructor. She was in charge of all of them. But I didn't want to go to her with the black card, with the race card. It was something I'd call my mom and she'd say, just do it. Just go in there and do what you have to do. But it was a bit insulting to have all of these black students in remedial writing. So it's something you just overcome. You just do it.
Food?
Oh, man. Food wasn't bad. It really wasn't. You got 3 meals a day, and they were going to feed you. And because I was on that special diet, I was eating a little more than I wanted. But the food wasn't bad at all. Some of the extra duties were challenging because you got in trouble. You had to go and, as most people say, cut potatoes and work in the kitchen, or you had to clean the barracks, or you had to, what they would call manicure the lawns. But it was all in discipline.
And your social life?
I don't think I really had a social life starting off with. Wow. Now at Fort McClellan, it was all about training. You had to get that training done. And that was the basics of everything. You had to learn that. Because when you left the basic course, you were going to be in charge of American sons and daughters. And so I wanted to make sure I was ready to take on that challenge.
So where did you serve?
I started at Fort McClellan, Alabama. That was the first assignment. After I left Fort McClellan, I went to Germany. I'm sorry, nope, back up. It's been 30 years, so forgive me here. Left Fort McClellan, Alabama. I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Not something I asked for. In the Army, they give you a dream sheet and they ask you, where do you want to be assigned? I put on my dream sheet, Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and Hawaii. Well, I got none of the three. I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, back to my home state. Left there and went back to Fort McClellan because that's my advanced training. You've been out there 3 years, they bring you back to give you more training. Then I went to Germany. From Germany to here, to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., Fort Monroe, Virginia, Fort Myers, Fort McClellan, again, wow, West Point, New York, Honduras, Fort McNair over in Washington, D.C., Fort Myer over in Virginia, the Pentagon, numerous times deployed.
So if you served abroad, where were those places you served?
I served in Germany. And at that time, my husband and we had gotten married. There was no honeymoon because right after our wedding, it was time to go, and I was shipped off to go to Honduras for an assignment down there for 4 months. It was even funny when the mail would come and they would call for Captain Wills, and I forgot that was my name because I had gotten married. I was waiting for my maiden name. But I was deployed there and he was in Germany. I got back and went to Germany with him. We were all over Germany. We served there about 4 years. He was an armor officer and me being an MP, so it was easier for me to follow his assignments because him being an armor officer, not many locations he could be assigned. But as an MP, military police, you need us everywhere.
So what memories do you have of some of those experiences?
Some are wonderful, some are fearful. My husband and I had a daughter, and she was an only child in Germany with us. So by us both deploying, it was fearful. I had to leave my child. I had to send my baby back to the United States to stay with my mom. That was painful, but it's something I knew I had to do. There was no one in Germany that I can't say I didn't trust, because I did. They would take care of her when I would go off to a field exercise. But for a long time, I would want my mom to have her. So that was very challenging and hurtful for me. Some of the exciting times were being in charge of soldiers. And now here I am, the commander of this organization. And the same physical training that I was passing out years ago, I'm like, well, we're going to run 5 or 6 miles. And we'd go run 5 or 6 miles through the German countryside. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And then the friends that you make in the military. Some of those same friends from 1983 are my friends today. Of course, we're all out now. Some of them couldn't believe I was still in, but we're all out now, and just wonderful friendships.
So you were in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Were you on the front lines?
Well, you know, when we say the front lines, we really think of World War II, how you got a group of men here and a group of men here, and they're fighting each other. Well, the front lines in Afghanistan aren't front lines. It's blurred lines, if you will. But I was there for a year. I was the Inspector General for all the troops in Afghanistan. So my staff and I would travel the country. So just as those soldiers are out there knocking doors down, and as most people will say, on the front line. So were me and my staff, because we wanted to make sure, one, they were safe, they were getting the food and the equipment that they needed, and we wanted to know about their morale. How were things going? Were they getting their mail? That is important to a service member who's deployed, getting that mail. Were they being fed appropriately? That's important to them. And that was our jobs as inspector generals, to make sure that those soldiers are being taken care of, making sure the commanders had what they needed.
Did you see combat?
In Afghanistan, combat, no. Suicide bombers, yes. So if we can define combat, it's not as it was, as I said, in Vietnam and World War II. So a cook who is on a cook who is not trained, as we say, for combat, but he is a soldier, she is a soldier. If they're on a convoy and something happens, then that becomes that service member's front line. They are ready to take on whatever it is that comes to them. Yeah, we were in a convoy and weapons were drawn on us. So if you want to call that a front line, then we'll say yes. But were we shot at? The answer is no. Did we fire our weapons back? The answer is no. So it's no longer that front line as we knew years ago. So every soldier is ready to do what he's supposed to do, because he's a soldier first, regardless of his military occupational skill.
So that really is the major difference in being in Afghanistan
Absolutely.
or Iraq.
Absolutely. We saw it in Iraq when we have Jessica Lynch. That young lady was a field handler, but she was on a, quote, front line because she was fired upon. She was taken as a POW. So that whole front line, it's blurred in this conventional war that we're fighting in now.
You mentioned that you formed friendships that have gone on for years and years and years. Can you talk about that camaraderie that you found in the service?
Yeah. You know, even when I said back in the years that I was an Allen at that basic course, I could have been an Allen, I could have been disgruntled, I could have been that angry black female sitting there not wanting to get along with anyone. And there are some like that. But I chose to build a bridge to the other side to say, you know, we're in this thing together. We're all military police, we're all here in 1983. Who knows where we're going to be 10 years from now? And some of us were still together 10 years from now. But we're on Facebook, we talk to each other. The military police has a ball every year, and we go to those balls and we sit down and reminisce, and you remember when. Those are some of our stories. And unfortunately, some of our stories are we miss Captain so-and-so who was lost in one of our conflicts, or we miss Sergeant so-and-so who was lost, or who have just passed on because of life's journey. So we are still connected on Facebook, and that's a good thing now that you can go back and find some of those people. Whereas years ago, it was the Army Times. You put a little blurb in the Army Times. I'm looking for Captain Wills. Has anyone seen her? And now you just go on Facebook and type in that name. And not only the name, but the face pops up. And it really brings back a lot of memories.
Is your husband retired?
He is. He retired after 26 years.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends when you were serving overseas?
When I was deployed to Honduras, it was through mail. It was slow mail. And as I said, that's a critical piece. Write a letter to a service member. But in Afghanistan here recently, we'd Skype. But it was the time difference, you know, where it was 9 hours ahead of Afghanistan is 9 hours ahead, 9.5 hours ahead. So it's just getting up early in the morning, making a phone call back home because I had a high school senior and I wanted to know what was going on with her. So the technology now is just wonderful service for service members who are deployed.
And the phone cards, I think, also.
Yeah, they did provide phone cards. There were some organizations would send boxes and boxes of hard cards. So you'd write a letter and send it home free. So there is no reason that mail's not coming back to the United States. So because that was very important.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Let's see. In the United States, spend time with my family, and travel to Louisiana to visit my mom, because and take my children, because they didn't know her as grandma because they weren't around. Whereas my nieces and nephews who still lived in Louisiana, they knew a grandma, get up on her lap and hug and kiss and bake cookies. My children didn't know that because they just were not there. So we did a lot of traveling back to Louisiana to be with family and friends. But also, I'm a bike rider. I love to ride a bike. My husband was a fisherman at the time, so he loved to fish, so we'd take the girls out and go fishing. Just do some things to get away from the military at the time.
So how many children do you have?
I have 2 girls.
Okay.
They're 6 years apart, so the oldest one was off doing her thing, and the youngest one was still trying to get there. But they're both grown. One daughter is at Hofstra University, her 2nd year, and my oldest daughter got her job in College Park, and she's doing quite well. We're proud of them.
Either of them considering the military?
I couldn't even get them to go to the academy. We were assigned at West Point. That's when my youngest daughter was born, and I couldn't even get them to go to the academy. So after both parents in the military, they were like, "No way, Mom, no."
So you came back from Afghanistan, but the war hadn't ended.
That's correct.
Did one term, one?
Yes. Actually, if I could just back up a bit, I'm also a survivor of 9/11. I was in the Pentagon.
Oh.
And the whole thing came full circle when I was told that I was going to Afghanistan in 2011. The day they captured Osama bin Laden, I was in Afghanistan. The very day I had just landed in Afghanistan. So I was there for a year, but we heard that President Obama was saying he's bringing troops home. And we were on a 1-year assignment, and everyone was eager. It's like, okay, maybe we're going to get this assignment curtailed to maybe 3 months, 6 months. But we stayed a year because we knew we had to do that. But now troops are coming home. And that's a good news story, to get them out of that country.
Talk about your 9/11 experiences.
That one I would tell you would be very difficult. And it's been, coming up on 13 years now. But it seems like it was just yesterday. And the friends that were lost, it could have been me, because I was on the E-ring right where the plane came in. My coworker, whose desk, she was sitting there. She was lost, and a gentleman sitting in my chair at my desk was lost. But I mean, just very hard to talk about. Plane came in, I was in a room, and the building started to crumble, and not to minimize it all, it was terrible. That was probably one of the worst days in the Army that I had. And we crawled from the inner room to a window and jumped out of the window, and some did not make it with us. And so many injuries I sustained from that. But, I just look back at it. It was not my time. It was a blessing for me to go on and do other things for the Army and for this great nation. And to have been over there where the destruction started in Afghanistan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when you finished your tour in Afghanistan, they just flew you back home?
I, as several other officers, I was a colonel, the inspector general over there. I was an individual augmentee, which means I didn't go over with a unit. I went over as a soldier, and that was my job. So when my day came on the calendar to leave, you out-processed Afghanistan and went back to Fort Benning, Georgia, where we got all of our training before we went to Afghanistan. Went back to Fort Benning to out-process that whole system, and came back to Washington, D.C. to my job that I had prior to that.
And when you came back, was your family happy to see you back?
Yes, and it was wonderful because my daughter was graduating from high school the same month that I was to return back, and it took 4 days to come from Afghanistan. You have to leave there and you go to Kuwait and sit 2 days, and then you're back to the United States, and it's about a day and a half flight. It's a long flight. So my goal was to count the days to make sure I was here for my daughter's graduation. And I got here 2 days before, but the time was, I'm still in Afghanistan's time, not the United States. So I was excited and all, but I was just dog tired. But I had to put all of that away because I wanted to be there for that graduation, because I had not been there for her whole senior high school year. But yeah, they were excited. So it was not only a party for her graduation, but a party just to have me back, back over here in the United States with my family.
How long have you been retired?
My official retirement date was 1 June 2013.
So it's not been that long.
Not that long at all.
And how are you adjusting to civilian life?
The first 30 days was hard.
Really?
Yes. No more getting up in the morning, doing your physical training, getting your uniform on, getting on the train to go to work. It's like, what am I going to do with myself? I have all of this time on my hand. But I adjusted okay. It was some things that I always wanted to learn to do, and I took up a couple of classes to learn how to do that. And then I started doing some volunteer work. I wanted to work with children, so I'm doing that. And I wanted to teach school, so now I am taking some classes to get ready to teach school. So it's all those things that I always wanted to do, didn't have a chance. So I'm like, I'm still young, I think, until my bones and stuff start hurting, but I'm still young enough to do those things.
Oh, very good. And what does your husband do in retirement?
He works for Homeland Security.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So he sort of went into the kind of work that you did.
Sort of, yeah.
And you said you remained in contact with friends that you've made, through your Facebook and your events that you have, and
right.
I'm sure you'll continue that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are you a member of any veterans organization?
Yes, I am. I'm a member of the Purple Heart organization, as well as Post 136, the VFW.
Okay, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Now, you touched upon it, but what have you done since you've been separated from the military?
Mm-hmm. First, I did do a lot of traveling. In the military, we have, I forget the official term, but it's military hops, where I can go to Andrews Air Force Base and get on a flight, and they give you a ticket and it says free, and they fly you wherever that plane is going. So I have been doing a lot of traveling, been to Hawaii, been to Puerto Rico, been down to Florida a couple of times, been to visit my mom a couple of times, because I have all of this free time and no children at home. So I've been doing a lot of traveling, but now I've kind of settled back down, and I'm taking those classes and volunteering and learning to upholster furniture and do those things that I wanted to learn. Mm-hmm.
So you said you wanted to teach. What age group do you want to teach?
I initially, it was always my goal to teach middle school history.
Really?
But I started substituting, and that was my first job, was to go into middle school and teach history. Unfortunately, the teacher didn't leave any plans, so I told the students, no problem, we're going to talk living history. So we sat in the class and we just talked living history with those students. But I've changed my mind a bit on the middle school, and I'm really looking at elementary education. Yeah.
I substituted, and I was told that at that age they're struck with a hormone fairy.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what it was.
How did your experiences, your military experiences, your wartime experiences affect your life?
It gives you a different perspective. Whereas, when you're young, you think you're invincible. Nothing will ever happen to you. And I'll be honest, that's what I thought initially. Then September 11th happened. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah, it can happen. And the good news is I'm a resilient person. And that was my platform when I was speaking about this whole September thing, is to be resilient in whatever it is that you do. You may not have a September 11th experience. Your experience may not be to that magnitude, but whatever it is, you can be resilient and bounce back from it. Even with my girls, they were very young girls when this whole thing happened. And especially my oldest one, she has been bounced around. I forget the count of the schools that she's been to. But that has just been my platform, to teach them resilience and to share that with anybody that I talk to, is how you're going to bounce back from whatever that problem was that you had. But I would tell you, it changed my perspective on the way I would watch politics. It changed my perspective on what I would even speak about on religion and politics and all of those other tough subjects. I won't debate them. I know what my goal is. I know what my moral values are, and they are not changeable. So it shakes you up a bit. You know, it makes you think a little different than the way you thought before. And for me, it's always a good thing.
So what would you describe some of your life lessons that you've learned from the military?
Mm-hmm. You know, before I even joined the military, and listening to my mom taught, she would say she knew I was always going to be a leader. This girl is going to lead something. I don't know what it is. But the military taught me a way of leading people. It taught me a way of managing things, resources, people, equipment. The biggest life lesson, and I know I had it before I joined the military, and the military just added up on it, is character. And that is what I've taught my children, my two girls. It's your character. How are you going to act when I'm not there? You know, or are you loyal to whatever this organization is that you are in? Are you a team player in whatever it is that you have vowed to do? So those are some of my life lessons that I take away from the military. But, you know, I know they were in me. The military just expounded upon them while I was serving.
What message would you like to leave for future generations in this interview?
Things in life will be challenging, but it's all about how you handle it. What are you going to leave? What legacy are you going to leave for your children? What legacy are you going to leave for this country? Again, you may not have this big, profound thing happen to you, but just the smallest thing, you will be surprised that you can pass on to someone else that will continue on for generations to come. The military was a wonderful, wonderful experience. It was a wonderful career for me. And I would tell anybody, join the military. It's not as tough as you think it is. It makes you a better person.
And just briefly, you know, you being a woman and an African American woman, mm-hmm. you were just one person in a sea often, yeah. and yet you were promoted continually. You've retired as a colonel.
That's correct.
So you did not let that stand in your way?
Absolutely not. As I said earlier, it's easy to play the race card. We can play the race card, but I didn't want to play the race card. I wanted to say I am just as good, if not better, than my contemporary. Just as good, not better than my peer. Judge me on what I do. Judge me, I would say judge me, but I was selected for promotion because of my potential, the potential I had for that next grade. I had the same potential as anyone else out there in the military.
Is there anything that you'd like to discuss that we haven't talked about?
I think you've absolutely covered it all. You've covered it all.
Okay. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service.
Thank you so much.